Senators, this bill before you, what it does is it would make advertising products that are legal here in the state of Idaho illegal to advertise. So further to that, because I know this has been brought up a lot in debate in committees, is it can't just be illegal in the state of Idaho. It has to be illegal in the area it's at as well. So, for example, by the federal government. The main topic that's being talked about right now is the marijuana that surrounds our state. Many states have decriminalized it and allow this service, even have delivery services. And I'm not sure how many of you have seen them or have not seen them, but I know in my district and several other border districts, there are signs for these cannabis shops in Oregon and Washington advertising for our residents to come across the border and get marijuana. Now, I'm not going to argue whether or not that individual chooses to drive across the border to take part in such an activity. But what I'm going to say is here in Idaho, we're one of the toughest states still in the union against marijuana and other drugs. We protect our youth, we protect our own, and we take a very strong anti-drug stance. But by allowing out-of-states to advertise such a product in our state sends a mixed message, especially to our youth. Youth will see these signs, they're putting for it, and they know what it's for, and what to do it, or where to get it, and how to do it. And it's a double negative, or I mean a double, they cancel each other out. That's what I'm trying to get at. Here you have us as a state saying drugs are bad, okay? But as long as somebody can make money off of advertising it, we're going to advertise it for you to be aware of where it's at to go get it. That's just not right, and doesn't sit with Idaho values or our morals. Also, what this does is what's the word I'm looking for? It entices people to cross the border, purchase marijuana, and we all know a lot of them bring it back over the state border, and that's state trafficking, interstate trafficking of drugs, which I believe is a felony, if I remember correctly. So it's inciting illegal behavior. But besides that, some of these dispensaries have delivery services, much like Uber Eats or something. And I've only been able to find one, but I have actually found one that promises delivery to the Treasure Valley in Boise. I don't know if that's done by mail. I don't know if that's done by an actual individual carrying it across the border, both of which would be illegal. But I have found it. This is also found in magazines and newspapers. They take out these ads to advertise for these products. And like I said, right now the talk is about marijuana, but this would make anything that's recognized illegal under federal code and Idaho code not available for advertisement in the state. Because right now, from my understanding, how we could do it is somebody could be advertising any illegal product on any billboard, and they'd be able to do that. Now, you were given a handout, and if you briefly look at that, you can see that the Idaho Sheriff's Association is in support of this. But what I want to get to is the second page. You see there an email. So I want to make this very, very clear. I do not have an official opinion from the AG's office, not whatsoever. But an email when asking about the constitutionality of this, because I'm sure many of you are thinking about freedom of speech. I'm just going to quote, Mr. President, I have an email from Phil Skinner in the AG's office talking about the constitutionality of this bill.
When is the email dated?
The email is dated February 29th, 2024.
Having cited the source and the particulars, you may read.
Thank you. For the RS to be constitutional, so he was talking about this when it was an RS, it would have to be limited to products or services that are illegal under the laws of the jurisdiction where offered. For example, Idaho cannot prohibit the advertisement of Nevada casinos in Idaho if that gambling is legal in Nevada, but Idaho can prohibit that advertisers for marijuana in Idaho, notwithstanding the fact that Washington, Oregon, and other states have decriminalized it under the laws of those states, since marijuana is still illegal under federal law. Supreme Court, if you look on the next page, you will get Supreme Court rulings where they have come out and said illegal activities, well, I shouldn't say, advertisement of illegal activities is not protected speech. So there is ruling on this. It is constitutional for us to do. And on the last page, there's an example. Those hotbox signs are in my district, in Senator 12's district, Senator 13's district. I know they're in there. And the others are from magazine and newspaper ads of them advertising here in our state. So you might be saying to yourself, well, radio waves, how do we block radio waves from coming in? I'd like to point out that the federal government, the FCC, regulates such things currently. And so we do have the capabilities of being able to regulate these things. But I'd warn that if there is something that we can't necessarily block, why would we still allow it in other mediums when we can block it? Can we block actual radio waves coming into the state? I'm not technological enough to understand that. I believe we could, from what I've seen in the military, what we've been able to block. But I'm not sure what type of technology that takes and if the state is capable of doing such a thing. With that being said, we can block what comes from our state in other types of medium, in solid medium, and advertisements on Facebook, for example, in the area, because you can target a demographic. So all these sellers have to do is not target the demographic of Idaho, and they're protected. So with that, I will sit down and open debate.
No further debate.
Mr. President.
Just.
Mr. President, would the senator from 11 stand for a question?
Trickle, you yield.
Yes, I yield.
There yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good Senator. Would a billboard be illegal in Idaho if it were aimed at changing an Idaho law?
Mr. President, good Senator, with that law, can you give me an example? So, could the good Senator give me an example?
Senator Just, can you
Sure.
clarify your question, maybe with an example?
Mr. President, I'd be happy to. Good Senator, if a law were, if a billboard were put up by a nonprofit group of the citizens to change marijuana laws in Idaho, would it be illegal?
Mr. President, I understand it now. Thank you. Mr. President, good Senator, I would say no, it does not, because they're not advertising the illegal product themselves. They are merely advertising the advocacy of changing the law to possibly make it legal, but they're not actually advertising the sale of marijuana itself. So I would say yes, they would be, no, they are not affected by this law. Yes, they would be protected and be able to advertise that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just one more question.
Senator Trickle, will you yield to another question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator from 11. Mr. President, the question is, would the spokesman review that takes advertising for product legal in Washington, and we'll say marijuana products, have to go to the expense of printing an Idaho-only edition?
Senator Trickle.
I'm going to have to ask that you repeat. Sorry, I didn't quite catch it.
Senator Just, please repeat your question.
Surely. Would the spokesman review that takes advertising for product legal in Washington, such as marijuana, have to go to the expense of printing an Idaho-only edition?
Senator Trickle.
Mr. President, good Senator, I would say, I'm assuming what you're talking about is in a hard medium like a newspaper or something where they have to print a special edition specifically for Idaho. I would say yes, they'd have to take out all the marijuana. If we're talking about marijuana, let's just use that for an example. They would have to take all those ads out, and I would like to point out that this has been done before in the industry. For example, California has very strict emission laws, and for those of you that ride motorcycles might be aware of this, you have your 49 state bikes and you have your California bikes, and that's because of emission laws that all manufacturers, Suzuki, Yamaha, Honda, Harley, had to make special edition, well, I shouldn't say special edition, they had to make a special version specifically for California. So if motorcycle dealerships can do it and manufacturers, I don't see why magazines wouldn't be able to do it. It's kind of a long-winded answer, but.
Mr. President,
Side by sides.
to debate the bill.
Senator Just, you have the floor to debate.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator from 11. I appreciate the answers to those questions. And it gives me pause to think that newspapers, not only the big newspapers like Spokesman's Review that have maybe deeper pockets, but the Argus Observer in Ontario They advertise for Idaho products. They advertise in Idaho. They have subscribers in Idaho. I think it would be a pretty high burden for them to bear. So for that reason, never mind the potential First Amendment conflicts, I will be voting against the bill.
Is there further debate? Senator Lenny.
Mr. President, would the senator from 11 yield to a question?
Senator Trickle, do you yield?
Yes, I shall kneel.
Senator yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a question about, I've read this bill a few times, and there's a bunch of little things that give me pause. There's not one big thing. But my question is, the bill says that any, I should have pulled it up, any medium or any format, so this includes like Facebook ads. So I had a question. I mean, if you have someone running a Facebook ad for something that's federally illegal in Idaho, you can run Facebook ads from anywhere in the world. My question is, how would that be enforced? How would someone in Idaho, if this passed, enforce some kind of judgment against the person running a Facebook ad?
Senator Trickle.
Mr. President, good senator. I hate hearing myself talk. For example, the Facebook ad, when you take out a Facebook ad, there's a paper trail to that. You spend money, it's connected to an account, there's people there. You can find out who's responsible for running said ad and be able to follow the trail, I guess I would say, to the individual that is doing this.
To debate the bill, Mr. President?
Senator Lenny, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I'm not necessarily against this idea because I am in District 13 in Canyon County, and I see these billboards for marijuana dispensaries and shops and stuff in Oregon. So if this bill was saying we can't advertise for illegal, if it was just tailored more narrowly, saying we cannot advertise for drugs on Schedule whatever on a billboard in Idaho, I would be all for it. But there's a lot of things here, enforcement. I mean, with Facebook, say you run a Facebook ad, what if you're in, China or something, or another state? I don't think we have the authority to enforce or go after people in other states. And then again, where I think it's too wide, or it's too broad is probably a better term, is if we're looking at anything that's federally illegal, this could cut into things that people in Idaho that have been federally illegal, non-legal, illegal, legal. I'm thinking about things like pistol braces or bump stocks or suppressors. What happens when the feds say, because we know there's always arguments around these things, what happens if, we decide the feds have gone back and forth on pistol braces, for instance, so then we can't advertise pistol braces in Idaho. So there's things like that. I think this could have unintended consequences and kind of go into other areas that I know the intent of the bill, and I actually agree with it, but I just think this needs to be narrowed down in scope a little bit. So I really want to support this. I just can't.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President, will the senator from 11 yield for another question?
I don't know. Let's ask him. Senator Trickle, do you yield? Senator yields.
Okay, so Mr. President and Senator, the debate we just heard brings up a question. So what happens when there is a conflict between federal law and state law about the legality of a product, and there's a notice or an advertisement in a jurisdiction in Idaho, but you have a conflict between the two laws? Let's take the example of the bump stock. Maybe an executive order or an agency action says it's illegal in federal law, but Idaho law would say it's legal. What does this bill do in that situation?
Mr. President.
Senator Trickle.
Good senator. That's easy to answer. Idaho does not outlaw that stuff. I believe we actually have statute saying where we do not recognize that, so that it would make it legal in Idaho and they would be able to advertise. The key word here, it has to be illegal federally and in the jurisdiction of where that advertisement is placed. So if there is ever the situation where we do not agree with a federal law and it's legal in the state, they can legally advertise it.
Mr. President, should debate the bill.
Senator Hearn, you have the floor.
Some lawyers in the room can weigh in. I'm not sure that's the way I'm reading it. It says on line 16. Start on 15. In any medium within the state of Idaho for a product or service that is illegal under the laws of the jurisdiction where the product or service is offered. So let's say a product or service is, there's a notice that offers bump stocks online. And it happens in Ada County or Canyon County, including federal, state, or local laws. What if there's a conflict between federal or state law on that subject? I don't read that as federal or state, and if one contravenes the other, I think that creates confusion. So I'll welcome the lawyers to weigh in on this. But actually going back to the senator from 15's point about the notice, marijuana is illegal, and I don't personally, I'm not going to start a campaign to advertise and make it legal in Idaho. I have no interest. I don't think I've seen any interest in the legislature to do that. But what if someone puts a notice, because it just says notice. It isn't just advertisement. It's notice or advertisement. Products illegal according to the federal government. Products illegal in Idaho, so there's no conflict there. But they're trying to petition us to make it legal. So they do that online. So it's a notice about a product that's illegal in Idaho. That seems to me like this would make that a misdemeanor activity to try to petition for making something that's illegal legal. That's the way I'm reading the bill. Welcome anybody to read it differently and explain to me how that's different, but that gives me concern that would have me a no vote at the moment.
Mr. President,
Senator Lee.
can the Senate go at ease, please?
Senator Gordy's. So that'll be in order. Prior to going to these, we were in the middle of interesting debate on House Bill 613. Is there further debate?
Mr. President.
Senator Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the good senator from 11 yield to a question?
Senator Treacle.
Yes, I will yield.
Senator yields.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good senator. So I have something that just recently happened to me, and it's caused me to reflect on how this would work out with this piece of legislation. So I was hoping you could help me maybe understand a little bit more. So I received a packet in the mail from an organization that is anti-marijuana. And in their information, they sell shirts, they sell all sorts of things that have pictures of leaves with the anti-signs, things along those lines on it to help raise money for their organization. I also know that in Boise, we have there's a hemp fest that takes place, and there's all sorts of vendors with all sorts of things that they sell that have pictures of marijuana leaves and things like that on there. I'm trying to find where in this bill there is a definition of what illegal products and services actually are, because I'm not sure how those two instances might be perceived under this bill and what is perceived as an illegal product.
Senator Treacle.
Mr. President, good senator. I just broke my mic. There we go. So those type of advertisements, they are not advertising marijuana. They are advertising, for example, a t-shirt, or last time I checked, federal t-shirts with drug paraphernalia are not illegal federally or in the state of Idaho. So those would be perfectly fine to advertise, those would be perfectly fine to wear. The whole thing is, the product they are advertising is legal. These marijuana ads we see are advertising marijuana, to smoke marijuana. They're not advertising a sticker. So I hope that answers your question.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President, to debate the bill a second time.
Does anyone wish to debate the bill for the first time?
Mr. President,
Senator Rutke.
I think my thoughts on the bill, I'm going to debate against the bill. They were encapsulated to some extent by the senators from 10 and 13, but I just wanted to put maybe a little finer point on it. I commend the efforts. I understand the issue. You got these illegal products, and yet in our state you see these billboards and hear radio advertisements and maybe TV advertisements, and it just seems inconsistent with the policy we've set in the state of Idaho. So that makes sense to me. But we're trying to get in here and do a little regulation of something that's very complicated. I mean, just some basic questions. How does this pertain to radio that is sent out in Oregon but received in Idaho, or TV, same thing? And the nature of advertising, the fact that it crosses borders, is partly why this area of law is so complicated and why we states don't necessarily get to regulate this. And then there's just some basic concerns, which I think is kind of where the senator from 13 was going. But the phrase, where the product or service is offered, is so vague. If a pot shop came to me and said, hey, we got this law, we're in Oregon, how do we deal with this? I'd say, well, just be safe. Put a billboard up, say the shop's name is Munchies. I'd say put the billboard up and just say, come to Munchies and get some air fresheners. So we just put air fresheners on there, but you'd have enough product exposure or name exposure that people would know what Munchies was all about. You'd be advertising some air fresheners. People would still come to your place. You might even get away with putting a picture of a marijuana plant on it, as long as the words you used weren't selling marijuana, weren't talking about marijuana. So, the language is vague in addition to all the other points that have been made. Again, I appreciate what the intent is, because it makes a lot of sense that if we've made a policy, we're not going to allow illegal drugs to be sold in the state of Idaho. It does seem odd that other states can advertise, but I'm not comfortable with this approach, so I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President, debate the bill.
Senator Lakey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, again, keep in mind, we're talking about commercial speech. We're not talking about First Amendment protected speech. There's a lower burden of proof here. Things that are illegal don't receive that same protection. And we're talking about a notice or an advertisement for a product or service. Trying to propose that something be legalized, I don't think is a notice for a product or service being offered. That's political speech. That's not commercial speech. That is more protected. We're also talking about the language of the bill. The prosecuting attorney has to prove that the product or service, it's a product or service that's being advertised. If they can't prove that however this entity advertises their product or service, if it's just simply a name of a business, they may not be able to prove that they're advertising a product or service. And it depends on what that business does. So the prosecutor has to meet the burden to show that it's advertising a product or service, not just a business name. So think about that. The prosecutor has to meet the burden under this specific language. And if they can't, then they can't establish that there's a crime in this case. So what we're talking about here again is a product or service that in this case, the example is marijuana, but pick any other product. They're advertising something that's illegal where they're offering or offering that product or service. So, Senators, I'd urge your aye vote as well.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Burtonshaw.
you know, I can't speak to the legal language in here, but I know growing up that we had advertisement for the Joe Camel and the Marlboro Man, and some of you guys probably aren't old enough to remember that, but it had a huge impact on me, and I think that it was focused for my generation. And those went away because of the tobacco problems that we have. The Millennium Fund Committee that I deal with today, the budget that I brought forth was tobacco settlement money to go towards cessation of tobacco and other drugs. If child porn were legal in Washington and advertised in Idaho, would that make a difference? Marijuana is illegal in every state by federal law. So that's, for me, that's where the crux of this starts. We're advertising in the state of Idaho for the benefit of whatever the business is in another state for an illegal substance that's illegal in Idaho, Oregon, Washington, wherever you go. And so for me, this helps put that in check. And with that, Mr. President, my debate is closed.
Is there further debate?
Mr. President,
Senator Grow.
thank you to debate the bill, if I may.
You have the floor.
Thank you. To me, this is a state sovereignty issue. I appreciate the remarks from the senator from 23 or whatever he is.
23.
23, good guess. Okay. To me, it's a state sovereignty issue. This may not be a perfect bill. If I were doing it, I'd do it differently. But I'm going to support this because of the intent that's there. We're trying to keep things that are illegal in Idaho out of Idaho. We're trying to prevent people from pushing products. These are people out of state pushing illegal products in Idaho, which adversely affects our citizen population. I would encourage you to vote for this. If it needs to fix this next year, let's fine tune it, but let's get this thing off the floor and at least get a start. and let states outside of Idaho know that this kind of thing is not welcome in Idaho. Illegal drugs are not welcome in Idaho, and the promotion of that kind of thing here is something that we as a state legislature have the authority and the ability to put a stake in the ground and say, don't bring your illegal stuff in here and don't promote it in Idaho. I appreciate your support and see if we can fix it a little bit next year. Thank you.
Is there further debate? Hearing none. Senator Trachel, you're recognized to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate the debate on the floor, and that's part of the reason why I like this job, is the sharing of ideas and differences of opinions. It's what makes us think, it's what makes this republic great, and it's what keeps this union alive, in my opinion. I'd like to address some things that were said. It was brought up again that if the state says something's legal and the Fed says it's illegal, then there's some sort of question of whether or not it can be advertised. It can be advertised. It has to be illegal in both jurisdictions. Guns, I've already said it. Idaho has laws very specific of what is and is not illegal in the state of Idaho. They would be protected. It was mentioned we can't go after out-of-state criminals. The makers of fentanyl are out of state. I guess we won't go after drugs. I don't like that argument. It's illegal. Keep it out of our state. Put the message to it. Just because somebody's doing it from out of state, we can get their arms that are in the state, between the states, organizations that are purposely coming in here to do illegal activity. We can stop that. We are a sovereign state. We control us. We are responsible for us. If other people want to come here and break the law or do it from out of state, we can go after them. Mentioned about the advertisement of political legislation to possibly change. We'll use marijuana again, since that's the hot topic, making it legal. They are not advertising the product of marijuana. They're advertising to make it legal. There is a difference. I have a concept in my hand right here, and I have a product in my hand right here. One of these is physical and can be utilized. The other one is an idea to get it across, to make it a physical entity. There's a big difference. It was said it doesn't define what is illegal. We don't define what's illegal in every single bill. These bills will be 40, 50 pages long. Do I need to list marijuana, cocaine, sex trafficking? I could go on. We have other statutes that explain what is illegal in the state of Idaho. That's why we have other codes. We don't put everything into one bill. I appreciate the good testimony from 23, 31, and 14. 31 kind of stole my thunder. We pushed this to be a discussion about marijuana, but he's 100% correct. If I wanted to take an advertisement right now for child prostitution, I can do it. Nothing stops me. If I want to advertise, like he said, child pornography, if I want to advertise a wife-beating service, if I want to advertise a hitman, I can do it. That is currently allowed. So this touches on more subjects than just marijuana. And we as legislatures, I would like to think we can tell the difference between what we know is illegal and what isn't illegal. And the common individual can do the same thing. So I find it really hard to believe that, for example, the Hemp Fest, hemp is not illegal in Idaho, is not going to be affected. That is the connection I'm trying to make with you. Illegal federally, illegal in the jurisdiction, i.e. the state of Idaho, where it is being advertised. That is the requirement. Casinos can advertise here because it is not federally illegal, even though it is illegal in Idaho. So there's your answer right there. That debate is closed.
Debate is closed. The question before the Senate is, shall House Bill number 613 pass the Senate? The Secretary will call the roll.
Adams. Aye. Anthem. Aye. Berndt. No. Bjerke. Aye. Burtonshaw. Aye. Carlson. Cook. Aye. Den Hartog. Foreman. Grow. Aye. Guthrie, Harris, Hart, Hartgen, Herndon, Just, Blakey, Lee, Lenny, Lent, Nichols.
60 seconds, Mr. President.
Senator Nichols, you didn't debate, correct?
No, I
you
did
just
not.
asked questions, so you're entitled to 60 seconds starting now.
Thank you, Mr. President. I really want to support this. I totally get the intent behind it, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around a few things. And the two main problems that I see is I can't find in this bill where there is any restriction that it only applies to commercial speech. I'm having a hard time finding that. My other concern is the federal government at any time can make something illegal. Let's take vitamins or raw milk or something like that, for instance. Now, all of a sudden, that can't be advertised according to what I'm reading in this legislation. So while I would love to support this and I love the intent of it, I just have some problems with the legalities and the constitutionality of it. So I'm going to vote no.
Senator Nichols votes nay.
Okonowitz, Robbie, Ricks, Ruckty, Schroeder, Semrov, Taylor, Taves, Drakel, Van Orden, King, Winder, Winthrop, Seiderveld, Carlson, Den Hartog, Harris, Hartgen, Lee, Lenny, Taves,
The vote count shows 16 in favor with 18 against and 1 absent. Fewer than a majority having voted in the affirmative. House Bill number 613 has failed to pass the Senate and will be returned to the House.